Hello everybody, welcome to this highlights edition of the Tour of Flanders on World Cycling Productions. I'm Phil Liggett, joined of course by Paul Showing. Well, it's a beautiful day here. It's Easter Sunday, blue skies, massive crowd, but there's always massive crowds for the Tour of Flanders, Paul.
There always are. You know, this is a great race. It is the biggest annual sporting event in Belgium. There can be anything between 500,000 and 1 million spectators at the side of the road.
And the field are here, 200 riders, 25 teams. The one that all of Belgium wants to see win is the winner for the past 2 years, Tom Bonen.
Well, Tom has been almost undefeated this year in the Belgian semi-classics. He won himself Kern-Brussels-Kern. He won the race across Belgium. He won the Grand Prix E3 a week ago, but I think he'd throw all of that away if he could win today.
Well, it's the usual course, 160 miles around the Tour of Flanders here. It starts with the first 100 kilometres on flat roads, but then the terrain changes.
It certainly does. Once the riders get down into the heart of the Flanders, it's zigzagging across the small Flemish roads, up and down, 18 climbs in total. The big ones down towards the end, of course, are the Muur de Grammont, and the final climb of the day, the Bosberg.
Well, the riders are signing in now here in the centre here in the lace capital of Belgium, and Paul, doing what he does well, is going to get in amongst them and talk to one or two. So let's first of all look at the route today for the 91st Ronde van Vlaanderen. By tradition these days it starts from the lace capital in Bruges, and then it goes down through Toulouse to Kortrijk and then into a series of climbs, and this is where the race really begins.
Yes, there are 18 climbs on the route. The first one is the Molenberg, but for me the real aggression starts at the 5th climb, the Haut de Quaremont, but then the decider is right down towards the end, because climb number 17 is the infamous Muur de Grammont, or Kapelmuur as it's now called, and the last climb of the day is the Bosberg, before the riders then head into Ninove-Meerbeek for the finish line after 259 kilometres.
It's a long way, but today the skies are blue, the weather is glorious, and as always, whatever the weather, the crowd is simply enormous to watch the traditional signing in of the riders. And they're always entertained by the same band every year as the riders now come in one by one to meet the race referees and to sign on.
The scary thing is, it's always in the last 15 or 20 minutes that all of these riders rock up to start. A former winner of the Tour of Flanders is Stefan Weserman, now sporting the rather strange green colour of Team Wiesenhof.
Yes, he switched teams for his twilight years. The whole of the Euskaltel-Euskadi team from northern Spain are here and signed in. Philippe Gilbert, a Frenchman, a Belgian rather, riding on a French team. He won Het Volk last year, so he likes these early season events. And that's got to be a great picture. I'm not sure that lens is wide enough.
Huge crowd. This is David Miller, I think riding the Tour of Flanders for the first time, a man who is better known for his time trialling ability. And this is Martin Janglay, a rather strange name, but in fact the Dutchman was the winner last year of the Tour of Belgium.
Champion of Belgium, Nico Eekhout, 13 wins for him last year. The biggest, of course, was the National Championship. And he's ready to fly the flag on home soil today. This is Kim Kirken, the champion of Luxembourg.
Yep, red, white and blue are his colours, not to be confused with the blue, white and red of the champion of Holland. And this is Michael Bogert, a man who really can ride on all terrains. But I expect today he'll be looking after a couple of teammates like Oscar Freire, for example.
7 wildcard teams getting rides today, amongst all of the Pro Tour teams as well, as they now continue to come and sign in.
Martin Elmiger, winner this year of the Tour Down Under, in fine form. We're looking now at Team Liquigas. This looks to me very much like Luca Paolini. He's the kind of rider who's got a very good chance, in fact, of getting himself a victory.
And Paolini, a good sprinter indeed. You never know. The Italians always seem to ride well in these early classics. Not so long ago, they didn't like coming to them at all. But that's all changing now. A chance for Unibet.com, Baden Cook there. This is another big sprinter, Eric Zabel. Will this rider ever give up? We hope not. Eric is a big winner, and he's 36 years of age now.
Leif Hoster, twice finished second in the Tour of Flanders today. He'll look to go one better if he can, and he may well be up against his own former teammate here, Stijn de Volder, who just recently had a win in the time trial stage of the 3 days of Lopana.
Yes, Hoster has had those 2 second places. I'd trade any one of them in for a win in his home Ronde van Vlaanderen.
Carsten Kroon, Team CSC, a very solid Team CSC here this afternoon. Stuart O'Grady and, of course, Fabian Cancellara, I think, is their big favourite, winner last year of Paris-Roubaix. And his challengers, well, here's one for a start. Oscar Freire, 3 times champion of the world, and from Spain as well, Juan Antonio Fletcher.
Yeah, Spain's still looking, in fact, for its first ever winner of the Tour of Flanders, and Fletcher's got best with the second place. Marcus Burkhout He's had a third place in the Grand Prix E3 this year, so he's on good form. His third season as a pro.
Nick Noyens, riding now for Team Cofidis, moved away from Quick Step, and he will have some pretty good support himself. And of course, Alessandro Ballan, a recent winner of the 3 days of La Panna overall. And he's a man today who will be tasting the Flanders cobblestones down towards the end. So too will the world champion Paolo Bettini.
Biggest cheer of the day so far, but Tom Bowen is just behind him, so he'll be the next man. And there he is, stretching it out behind Bettini, who is out on stage. Tom Bowen, the pin-up boy of Belgium, and he'll go out to an enormous cheer today.
And so will this man too, maybe riding his last ever Ronde van Vlaanderen. This is Pieter van Pietegem. He's won the Tour of Flanders previously, and of course Paris-Roubaix, and he's a specialist, Phil, in these Northern Classics. Well, David, I always regard you as pretty much of a time trialist, but this is quite a serious rendezvous today, the Ronde van Vlaanderen.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of had a gap in my program, and as a cycling fan, I wanted to come and do it. And I kind of chosen the right week with it being so beautiful. I did Tour of Flanders before this, get kind of in the spirit of the thing, and I kind of really enjoyed it there. So I'm looking forward to today.
It's a great race. It is all about the atmosphere, but it's a very tough race down toward the end. Those 18 climbs, that's really where it all happens.
Yeah, I mean, all these classics are just a different level of difficulty. So yeah, I mean, this one's got a reputation about it. So I don't know, it's going to be good. I mean, I've been a bit sick, unfortunately, the last 2 days, but I don't know. I'm just going to try and enjoy it.
Well, I hope you do enjoy it, because there's a lot of climbing to do.
Yeah, I'll try. Yeah, see you later.
Well, Matty, it's always a bit strange for us to come here to the Tour of Flanders. More strange today because we expect Team Discovery Channel. We normally talk about George Hincapie, but you've got Stijn de Volder.
Yes, Stijn de Volder, and my dark horse is Gusev, Vladimir Gusev. He's was a little bit quiet. He got fifth in the Panna, third in the last stage time trial, and you know, last year he proved that at Roubaix and as well as Flanders, he's only 24 years of age and he's getting better every year.
Amazing thing is, Team Discovery Channel, since the retirement of Lance Armstrong, since George Hincapie's injury, you're still a very strong, solid team.
I think this year we've proved we're definitely the best. We're definitely the best stage race riding team in the world. That's without a doubt. We bought really well over the winter with Contador, with Pelligno, with Leipheimer, those sort of guys. I think for the one-day races here, especially in the Flemish week with Flanders again, Roubaix, we're a little bit lacking that big punch without George, especially. But for the stage races, for the Giro, for the Tour, for the Ardennes, we're a lot stronger this year with Popovic, Davis, Pelligno, Contador. We've got a very, very complete team this year.
Okay, good luck today.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, Tony, at least the sun's shining for the Tour of Flanders. It's a pity George Hincapie's not here, but you know, Stijn de Volder, Gusev, you've got good chances today.
Yeah, we have three really strong guys with Stijn, Gusev, and Weitkus also. And yeah, the weather's nice. It's always a plus to have sun in Belgium.
What do you hear about George Hincapie? When will he be back racing again?
George is going to start again with the Tour of Georgia. So when's that? Another 2 weeks, I think.
And a rider like yourself today, it's a lot of responsibility because you've got a lot of work to do behind the scenes looking after people.
Yeah, for me today, the guy to take care of is Stijn de Volder and try and help him, keep him under control because the kid's got a lot of power. He just needs a little more guidance. So hopefully I can do that for him.
Good luck today.
Thank you, Paul.
Well, as a Belgian rider, you must be super motivated by today because the Tour of Flanders for a Belgian is almost the World Championships.
It's the most important one-day race of the year, so I'm super motivated to go for a very good place here today.
Okay, good luck. Tour, this is a very special race. You've got the right build for the Northern Classics. Are you motivated for today, Tour of Flanders?
I just need good legs, so I don't know if I have them on, but I hope so.
You have to know the course, you have to be concentrated, and at the end, you really have to have the power and to be able to recuperate and go with the moves.
I mean, it's a hard race from the start to the end, and we're going to be out there for 6-7 hours. So yeah, you need good legs the whole time, especially in the climbs. You need to hang on, and if somebody attacks, you have to follow. So yeah.
It's a kind of race that you really have to want to race.
Excuse me?
It's a kind of race that you really have to desire to race to come up here and do well.
Oh yeah, for sure. You have to be really concentrated in your head because it's such a big effort. So yeah, you have to be ready and motivated, and you need good form as well. Thanks.
Well, Tyler, this is it. This is the big time now. This is the Tour of Flanders. Are you surprised by the crowd here?
Oh, it's incredible. You know, I've done races like the World Championships before. I kind of thought I knew what to expect, but this is incredible. It's twice as big as anything I've done before.
It's amazing. There's a special buzz to races like the Tour of Flanders and Paris-Roubaix. You can almost, in the starting area this morning, feel it.
Oh, it's really true. It's Belgium, you know. They love the bike here, so a race like the Tour of Flanders, the whole country comes out for it practically. They're saying almost 1 million people on the route today, so should be quite an experience.
And the Belgian riders on your team, they must have been crazy this morning.
Oh yeah, I think everybody's a little nervous, little worked up for today, but no, I think it'll be a good day.
Good luck and enjoy it.
Thank you very much.
Be careful with the drive. I'm not sure he has a license.
So to the cheers of the crowd and to the bells on the church here in the square, it's rollout time now for all of the riders in the Ronde van Vlaanderen as they head out of town and onto the open roads and under perfect conditions. Looking at the peloton now in the Tour of Flanders, the shadows are on the road. They're still a little bit higher in the sky than it was at 9 o'clock this morning, about 45 minutes before they started. But you can see there the gap to a leading group of some 7 riders, now 9 minutes and 14 seconds. Well, it was 12 minutes. And as soon as we catch up with the leaders, we'll give you all of their names. A little bit of reaction, Paul, but also a little bit of a shock for Tom Bone, a faller early on.
Well, always the case here in the Tour of Flanders, a number of riders crashing, and we do believe it's not too dramatic a crash, but he did spend a little while, Phil, riding alongside the doctor's car. Right in the middle there, you can see Stuart O'Grady for Team CSC, Tom Boonen riding right up to the front end of the main field. We've been already over the first climb of the day, the hill of the Molenberg. The riders now lining themselves up for the Wolvenberg, and then it really starts to get very hectic because almost every 10 kilometers there's another climb. 18 climbs in total, and that's all in the last 125 kilometers of racing.
Well, the peloton are enjoying the spring sunshine here. Very unusual, I must say, in Belgium, but it's lovely to see. And we're expecting to see huge crowds once we get down to these little hills, which we call the Bergs of Belgium, here in Flanders. They're all ahead of the race, really, and the steep ones there too. And I think because there's such a big field today of 200 riders, we're going to possibly see riders forced to walk on these climbs. The breakaway, by the way, these 7 men: Enrico Franzoy of Lampre, Martin Jalingi of Skill, Alexander Kuzinski, Liquigas, Johan Koenen of the Chocolat Jacques, our old friend and breakaway expert Jose Vicente Garcia Acosta, he's on the Caisse de Pan these days, Laurent Mangel of AG2R, and David Boucher of the Lambau Credit. Now, it's fair to say that none of those riders will have been on anybody's favourites list today, but they are the cannon fodder out front, and they've had a lead, Paul, of over 12 minutes.
Yes, but once we start to get into the very difficult hilly part of the Tour of Flanders, that will come down dramatically. We've already shaved off almost 3 minutes. You can see the urgency at the front end of the main field as all of the teams and riders move forward to try and help their own team leaders to get into the right place for the climb. There's an incident at the back here. This is Ronnie Matthias from the Bouygues Telecom team, and he's having a little bit of a problem with his rear brake. In fact, it's not his rear brake, it's his saddle, and that is going to be a little bit of a problem for him, Phil, because coming up very shortly is the next climb, second climb of the day, the Wolvenberg, which reaches a maximum of 17.5% gradient.
And as they get to the start of these little climbs here, because up until now we've had something like 2.5 hours of cruising around the flatter roads of Belgium, not far inland from the coast on the North Sea. And because of the beautiful day here today, I can tell you that the autoroutes, the freeways here, have been totally jammed, unusually going away from the race route, as all of the Belgians are heading to the beaches and the coastline. And this is going to cause a lot of problems, I think, generally for motorists going home tonight. But for the riders, they can expect to race these hills very, very quickly indeed. Here comes the big drive now from T-Mobile.
Well, T-Mobile, they're trying to get themselves organised because very shortly they'll turn onto the Wolvenberg. Alan Piper in the team car as team manager of T-Mobile at the moment. Bert Gratsch is one of the riders they're trying to move up to the front, but a rider from T-Mobile who's been riding very well these last 2 weeks in Belgium is the youngster Marcus Burghardt, and I think he may well be the little joker in the pack for them here this afternoon. And of course they can always count on the very experienced Servaes Knaven.
Servaes Knaven, the winner of Paris-Roubaix, and he's been champion of Holland as well. Oh, and there's been a fall as they made that left-hand 10, a sweeping fall here. It's a Boyk Telecom rider who's hit the deck, and alongside him too is one of the other riders. I think it was a Cofidis rider, and I think it might have been either Kevin de Weert or possibly Tyler Farrer, who went down. Just couldn't quite see his number there. It was 93 or 95. Well, this is a little bit of a heavy fall, and he's been left behind.
Well, Phil, this is the chaos which is Paris, Tour of Flanders. Let's have a look and see exactly where it happened. And this is the rider you can see just went down at the left-hand side of the road. Riders will take an awful lot of risks just to move up 5 or 10 places. And it's coming to us that it's Alexander Pichot of Boyk Telecom who went down very hard like that. And the rider moving away, I think, was the Cofidis rider, Mathieu Heibour. But he'll have a big chase now to get himself back into the front end of the main field. That's the important thing, Phil, about Tour of Flanders. You've got to ride in that first 15 to 30 riders and try and avoid those incidents at the back.
You see how the gap is coming down, 118 kilometres remaining to the finish, 8 minutes 40 the gap. And this is completely flat-out racing now at the front, and you've got to be strong, you've got to be alert, and you've got to stay, as Paul says, in the front half of the peloton. And this is the reason why, as they hit the Wolverberg here, and right on the front, the world champion Paolo Bettini. There's no better way to keep out of trouble than to drive the charge, even though there is 117 kilometres to go. Well, I have said that it's. I think this was a race to suit Bettini. He might be out to prove me wrong.
Well, Paolo Bettini is the kind of rider, really, who wants to do a good performance in the Tour of Flanders. He loves this race, and in fact, the rider who he used to ride alongside many, many years ago, Phil, was Michele Bartoli, who not only won the Liège-Bastogne-Liège, but also won the Tour of Flanders as well. And that's pretty much where the world champion learned his trade.
Well, he was a personal friend of Bartoli in those days, and when Bettini himself won the Liège-Bastogne-Liège, the first man he called to tell him from the finishing line podium was Michele Bartoli to say he'd won LBL. Well, this is the most interesting move now, and this is the feeler move. This is to try and get this race down to a much more manageable peloton, because take your eyes to the top of our picture here. That's where the riders are literally queuing up to get into position. The amount of energy they waste is enormous, and this rider knows how to cause pain. Sitting right here at the back, Paul, and that is Mathieu Heibour, so I think you were right. He's rejoined the field.
Difficult time for him, and it's definitely not the right time to rejoin the field. But I think what is interesting is at the moment we're looking at the main field going over the summit of the Molenberg, Phil, and shortly the breakaway is about to go over the Wolvenberg. They're separated by around about 7 kilometres on the road, and that corresponds to the now 8¼ minute difference. But that will change once we get to the successive nature of the climbs which are lying ahead.
Well, the Molenberg is over and done. It is 460 metres long. And it is cobbled, of course, and it's a gradient maximum of 14.2%. So they're over the top of that, and a chance to drive on. And it looks as though CSC here, with some big guns firing today for their club, their team, likely to get in on the action. Watch out for Stuart O'Grady and Fabian Cancellara. I think they'll be the two protected riders, and possibly Karsten Kroon, who also is a man who could do a good ride here. There's a wonderful sight from the helicopter, the long line of the riders in the Tour of Flanders. The riders at the back just wishing they could get to the front here, but at these sort of speeds there isn't a lot you can do about it except follow the wheel in front.
Well, you're just waiting for the white flag of surrender to go up for a moment. This is Lars Mikkelsen on the front here. He's doing the work for Team CSC, and I think you're right. They will be working for Cancellara here this afternoon, and of course Stuart O'Grady, who is lying up there in about 8th or 9th position. So O'Grady's in good form here this afternoon. And he's the kind of rider who enjoys these kind of races, robbed of a chance to perform in the Classics last year because he had that very nasty accident early on last season in Tirreno Adriatico.
Lars Mikkelsen, who made his first name for us back in 1995 when he won Ghent Wevelgem. Remember that race coming up in just 3 days' time, midweek. And Mikkelsen no doubt will be in that as well. He's 38 years of age now, Lars Mikkelsen, so there's not a lot more racing in those legs, but there's plenty in them today. Enjoying the feeling of the warm sunshine, first real warm sunshine of the year in this part of Europe.
Well, this is the Kop van de Weekstrijd. This is the front end of the race. This leading group of 7 riders have now lost 4 minutes. Sitting at the back there, you can see the man who wears number 203 is Steven Kataiven. Long section of cobblestones this, Phil. It's nicely laid out. It's very smooth indeed. Very fast section of cobblestones. In the Tour of Flanders, you've got a very strange mix of cobble climbs and flat sections of cobblestones, which makes this a very special race. And for the Belgians, it's probably their most important day of the year. For many of these riders, they regard it as the most important one-day race they can ever take part in.
Well, little view of the peloton. Slowly but surely the gap is coming down. 8¼ minutes. They're holding for a moment, but of course we're getting into a fast succession of the climbs very, very shortly, and that is when I think the reaction will come and the field will start to split up under the impetus of people like Bettini, possibly Cancellara, and I would think certainly today Stuart O'Grady.
Well, they're calming down a fraction now. They've been over that first climb of the Molenberg. I'm just looking down the list of dark blue jerseys there to see if I can see any sign at all of Tom Boonen. Boonen, we are hearing over race radio, was involved in a crash early on, one of those strange crashes that happen when you don't expect it to have any serious effect, but we do believe he went back to the race doctor and he rode alongside the race doctor for a long period of time, holding on to his wrist. So I hope Boonen is okay, and I'm sure most of Belgium do too.
Just look at the face here of Bettini. Time to take on some food now after a little skirmish to try and shake out a few riders, but the Quick Step boys are all here really for Tom Boonen. At some stage there'll have to be a decision made, of course. We can see Tom Boonen sat back about 4 men. But this now they've got the strong men to the front, you see. They can block the road off here, and that is also good.
Well, Tom Boonen is there over to the left-hand side. I'm not sure if you saw how quickly that domestique grabbed that bottle. He was in the middle of the peloton. There's an incident at the back again here. There's so many incidents. Something is going on all the time, and this is in the leading break. That's Garcia Acosta, who's had a rear wheel puncture, and he is hopefully, I think, going to try and get a quick change and get himself filled back up to that group of riders. But this is very often what happens when you get serviced by the neutral service car. You don't get the right wheel, you haven't got the right size, and you can see the rider now starting to panic a fraction. This is how it happened.
Well, this is very, very sad, but if you're going to have a flat tyre, have it while you're leading the race by 8 minutes, and you've got a chance of getting back into the breakaway here. He's got his wheel change, and he's a hard-working man. He's only got 1 win last year, and he didn't score any in the same race this year, which is now gone, the Tour of Castilla y Leon. It's a race run in March. He won the 3rd stage a year ago, as born in 1972. So again, here's another man here now in his 35th year.
Well, he'll have to take some risks. The main field, I think, are slowing down a fraction. It's always interesting to note that Eric Zabel, just up there on the left-hand side, sitting up, rides right at the front end of the main field. Left-hand side in the red, white and blue, he's the champion of Holland. World champion Bettini sitting in the middle there in the white jersey with the rainbow bands around the middle. He is going to ride up at the front end of this main field, and I wonder, once we get down towards the finish line, Phil, if they will try and help out Tom Boonen, or if the world champion will try to win this race for himself.
It's very difficult to analyse that, Paul, because both riders are in some ways similar, in other ways they're poles apart, but we never know quite whether Tom Boonen is a sprinter or, as we call, a stayer. A man can also win from long breakaways. He's a strong rider, and typically Bettini can also sprint and can also ride away. So there's 2 very genuine aces in the pack today of Quick Step. I think if the hearts rule the day, then it would have to be for Boonen in front of his own people, but we will see. Looking here now at number 98, so that'll be Staff Sheerlinks here, who is just taking a little bit of a check at the back of the race. There'll be plenty of this today, I can tell you. And I've got a feeling that Sheerlinks was the faller, because an 8 looks a bit like a 6, and it looks like he's still taking a little bit of repairs on board here from that crash.
Well, everybody has a story at the end of a race like the Tour of Flanders. I did notice when we were looking at the front end of the main field, Phil, that Oscar Freire was also riding in the first 10 or 15 places. He too is being very attentive.
So there we are, a little bit of a pat on the backside, and he's back in the race. We're looking down now at the field, and there they are all together. A long, thin line of riders, 8 minutes, 57 seconds the gap.
Well, the leading group now is at 113 kilometers to go. The next climb they will face is when they come up to the climb of the Klausberg. Now that is a tarmac climb, and 2 climbs after that the riders go over the Knokteberg, which I always believe is the setup for the old Quaremont, which comes at 82 kilometers to go. And to me, that is always the first time we get a real sort out in the main field, and that's when they'll start to pick up the pace.
Nice bit of steady pace making being done here by Quick-Step. Meanwhile, there's still trouble for the Cofidis boys.
Somebody else has gone down
There's
there.
another crash on the right of the road, and that looks, yes, indeed. And oh, the front end of his bike has completely snapped off here, and that would have been a very, I think it's Heinrich Hausler. It is Heinrich Hausler who's gone down. Well, that is really bad, because that looks like, it reminds me of shades of George Hincapie in Paris-Roubaix. That crash got breakage of equipment right at the front of the bike, look.
The problem with something like that is, Phil, you don't have any chance at all to try and control your fall, and you'll be surprised at how hard these cobblestones are. They're serious pieces of granite which have been laid down, some of them for over 100 years. But once the machine gives up like that, you just go down like a sack of potatoes.
Well, he seems okay. I'm not sure whether he's calling for another bike here. And I think he's going to try and get back in this. I don't know. That right leg is a little bit stung there. Let's get back up to the action here. 112 kilometers left to go. It's still tempo being done here by Quick-Step. None of this surprising now. But you see the dangers, and you see the crowd here spilling onto the road. And this is always difficult for the riders now. They've got to stay so alert. The amount of nervous energy that they get rid of on the Tour of Flanders, I think, is enough for a whole season.
It certainly is. It is a very nervous race. At the end of the day, the riders are not only tired physically, but they're also tired mentally because of all those accelerations to get into the climbs in the first 10 or 15 places. Teammates are on the edge all of the time. You can use a race like this, you can lose a full set of brake pads. Look at the length of the main field there. You can see they really are stretched out, and just over to the right-hand side, we're looking to see where that accident happened. In fact, you can just see it there by that car, and it looks to me as if Hausler went down completely on his own.
I think that was a total breakage of equipment that he wasn't expecting, because he wasn't near the edge of the road. He was on his own, and the rattling over the pavé, that bike has literally shattered, and he's fallen off. And the thing about a fall like that, Paul, is you're never ready for the fall because you don't expect it.
And you can't react to it either, because it's as if the bike is taken away from you, and that's exactly the worst kind of fall that you could ever have. And rather sad. I hope that he's going to be okay. We're now coming into the town here of Mater, and the riders in the main field will be facing up to another long section of cobblestones too, because when they come through that town of Mater, there's a section of cobblestones called the Kattenberg.
And take a look at the time gap, because it's pulled out a little bit now. We've pinched back about 20 seconds for those leaders. That's despite a puncture to Garcia Acosta up in that leading group. They've eased off the pressure. This is Nico Eekhout here, the champion of Belgium, and not looking too happy at all as he slips down the cars here. Well, he's a man who's got wins this year, but he's not a big winner as we would expect him to be. And yet all throughout his career, he's won quite a lot of races. He's won more than 60 bike races as a pro, and 1 victory to his belt already this year. But he doesn't like Flanders.
Well, a lot of riders from Tinkoff either are not enjoying Flanders this afternoon. This is the next section of cobblestones I was telling you about. This is the Kerkgate section of cobblestones, 3 kilometers in length, and already the acceleration in the front proving just a little bit too much for 1 or 2 of these riders. This man going backwards here is a French rider on Caisse d'Epargne, Eric Berthoud. Doesn't look like much at all, does it? But when you try and ride across this section of cobblestones at about 50 kilometers an hour, it really is hard to find your rhythm.
Well, there's plenty of cobblestones for the next few kilometers now before we cross the River Scheldt, which is one of the biggest rivers that goes through Belgium. And the field, I think, that was the initial sortie as they hit the Molenberg. Now they've assessed who is strong, who is looking for the win, and they're just trying to hold their position by blocking off at the front, and nobody, quite literally, can move up because the roads are only narrow. The strongmen in position. Oscar Freire, by the way, this morning was very confident he might have a good ride today. He said, why not? Now, if he were to have even a first 3 finish, that would be a first by any Spaniard.
Well, he's a very enigmatic rider. You can never predict. I don't think he can ever predict. His life and his career has been completely and utterly dogged by injuries. But when he's on form, he can win any kind of race anywhere in the world, whether it be over a mountain pass or whether it be on the flatlands. This is the achteraan van de peloton, the rear end of the main field. And you can see, Phil, that tempo riding at the front is having a serious amount of damage done at the back.
And those new green colours of Lambau Credit. Sitting right at the back was Frédéric Amorisson, last man at the moment, and also his teammates there too, Philippe Mierhager, perhaps better known to many of us as a great mountain biker. He's the rider in green to the right of the two at the rear, and he's moving back up the field now.
Well, these riders again on this, still on this long section of cobbles, 3,000 metres, and that's there's another rider.
Ball, sorry.
Tinkoff gone down there with somebody from Discovery Channel 2 having a hard time.
Yes, and that looks as though it's Tony Cruz has been stopped at least. That is Tony Cruz, and there's a Tinkoff rider on the floor. Again, they've had a touch of wheels on what is a complete straight stretch of road, but again, it is because the riders are just following each other into the potholes.
And look, you might have noticed there are a number of bottles on the ground. That's also very dangerous on the cobblestones. You can see two more bottles over to the right-hand side. That also could have provoked that accident. The serious thing you have to do when you're riding a race like the Tour of Flanders or, of course, Paris-Roubaix is you've got to keep squashing your bottle cage in to make sure your bottles don't jump out. First of all, it's dangerous, and secondly, you don't want to ride for 20 or 30 kilometres without a drink.
Well, take a look right around along the line of riders here, right to those cars. A lot of riders again split off on what was a flat section of road, remember, but cobblestones, as the leaders drive on here, and this peloton of some 200 starters, I think he's down to about 140 riders right now, as they continue with 108 kilometres to go. Now, we're not showing you much of the breakaway. That, of course, is out of our control. That's up to our host cameraman. But there are 7 riders clear. And let me give you the names again. Enrico Franzoy of Lamprey, Martin Jalingli of Skill, Alexander Kuzinski of Leaky Gas, Johan Koenen of Chocolat Jacques, Jose Vincenti Garcia Acosta, Case de Pan, Laurent Mangel, AG2R, and David Boucher of Lambau Credit. They're the leaders. And they've had a lead at 12 minutes, down to 8 minutes 12 at the moment, as we now head on to the Wolvenberg. This is the second climb of the day for the peloton, because the breakaway's already through.
Not too much to worry for these riders. This is not a cobbled climb. It's a maximum 17.5%. The average gradient is 8%, but we are now starting to get our legs stretched a little bit for these riders as they head up to what will be very shortly in about 20 kilometres time at the Old Quaremont. And I always say this, Phil, every year. To me, the start of the Tour of Flanders proper, the real racing begins once we get to the Old Quaremont.
Oh, spoken with feeling. Well, there's the flags of Flanders, those yellow flags with the black line on them. The line of Flanders currently, it's been held by a lot of famous Belgian cyclists, that title. Currently, it's Tom Bonen. He's in there, just tucked behind these front runners. We've seen him quite frequently. He's waiting and hanging on, but he's, well, hanging on, probably not the word to use right now. He's just riding cautiously, waiting for his chance, and he knows he's got some strength in the world champion Bettini around him. I don't think there's any rivalry between those two riders on the same team, do you?
I don't think there's any rivalry at all in Team Quickstep. I think that's the important thing that Wilfred Peters does with the team. He brings them together as one solid block, and I would think even though Paolo Bettini wants to win the race, there is absolutely no way, Phil, that he would steal it away from Tom Bonen. If Bonen feels that he's got the winning of this race for the 3rd year in succession, he can count on the team. And let's not forget, not only has he got Paolo Bettini, but he's also got Peter van Petegem. And I looked at van Petegem this morning, and you should have seen the thighs on him when he was standing on the podium being presented to the crowd with Bonen.
Well, it would be lovely to see a great ride from him as he says goodbye to the Tour of Flanders, and the career has been very successful this year. This is the peloton. They're now over the top of the Wolvenberg, and next stop will be the next climb, be the Gleisberg, followed by the Knokterberg, and then on to the Old Quaremont climb itself. Here's life at the back. It's work, 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 bridge gaps. That's all you do at the back of the race, I'm afraid, in the Tour of Flanders, and you keep on just hoping that things go right in the end. Christophe Mangeon sitting at the back, Française de Jeu, and also with him there is Marcus Eichler of Unibet.com just in front. At last, somebody's given the team a ride in a classic race this year.
Yeah, and in their actual jersey as well. We've seen them riding all over Europe this year. Some serious difficulties for that team in France, where online gambling is completely illegal. And in the early part of the year, they actually raced with a plain jersey with a question mark on it. Well, I don't think that question mark yet has been answered.
No, and it could go on for a while yet. But they're riding here today, and no doubt will want to try and make an impression. With Baden Cook, there is a chance. Jimmy Casper less so, perhaps, but they're the two sprinters on the squad. We'll see.
Well, I tell you what,
at the back.
the leading group of riders now, Phil, can only be 2 or 3 kilometers away from the Klausberg, which is the first of 3 difficult climbs. Over the Klausberg, drop down for a fraction into the town of the Mont de l'Enclus, and then over the Knokteberg, which I think is a nasty little climb to set up the riders for the Old Quaremont. Just look at that average speed as well. They're cruising down a cobblestone section here at 70 kilometers an hour. That's around about 44 miles an hour.
Making it look rather easy, but that gap, believe it or not, now they come over the top of the climb. You see the pressure goes on the climb by the peloton, then they tend to ease back, and the breakaway is pulled out again to just on 8.5 minutes at kilometers 105 from the finish. But still, basically all of the climbs of this year's race is still to come. On to the Kattenberg is where we're headed to next, and that's 1,200 meters of cobblestones, but basically flat.
Basically flat, not too much to worry about, but it all seeps away the energy over the period of this afternoon. 6.5 to 7 hours of racing. Your acceleration and deceleration just keeps adding that little bit of extra fatigue into the body, and it's the man who is the fittest and the man who is the freshest down towards the end who runs out the overall victor. It really is, at the end of the day, the survival of the fittest.
Well, there's the crowd enjoying a quiet Easter Sunday. At least all the roads are closed. There's no traffic to worry about, just the passage of the Tour of Flanders. Nice steady pace being done here by Quick-Step at the front. I think this is Stephen de Jong setting the pace just now for the team. Little flick of the elbow, which means your turn, Mr. Rabobank, to come and help out, because with a man like Oscar Freire on the team, they too have a likely race winner today.
Well, there's a lot of teams are not playing the gambling game so far. They're quite prepared to come up to the front end and share the pacemaking, because they realise that 8 minutes and 20 seconds is a lot of work to pull back. There's Stuart O'Grady in the red and white jersey of Team CSC. Very good rider, O'Grady, when it comes to placing himself at the front end of the main field.
Clever
Doesn't use
rider.
up too much energy at all. He floats around in the first 10 or 15 places. That is an art and a skill that he learned with his track background.
Yes, if only he could break his duck. That's all he wants to do, is finally win a big race, because he's in second, third, fourth, fifth every time he rides a race, and he just needs that little ounce of good luck, and he'll be across the line in first place.
Just over to the left-hand side, there's a large rider with a blue and white helmet on. That is Tom Boonen. He's looking comfortable. Maybe that incident early on, Phil, was just a normal incident that we see many of, but this is the normal incident that you see a lot in the Tour of Flanders too, because these little directional islands, they are so dangerous. That's another reason why you always have to be alert.
And life at the back of the bunch not so pleasant here as they dodge these traffic obstructions. One or two riders with their hands up also want either a drink or they've got flat tyres, and they quickly reform at the front here. Well, 4 riders hold the record in this race, having won the race on 3 occasions, only 4 of them, and today Tom Boonen is trying to become the 5th. 2 riders, Arkiel Buis, Magnier, Eric Lemont and Johan Museo are the big names who have won this race on 3 occasions.
But only Magnier is the only other rider who's actually won it 3 times in a row, and that's the record that Tom Boonen is hoping to try and equalise here this afternoon. He's been completely dominant, Phil, in all of these semi-classics in the northern part of Belgium so far this year, with the success starting in Kuurne-Brussels-Kuurne, which he took out the victory of. The Travers Belgique, the race across Belgium, he was the winner there, and an emphatic win just a week ago in the Grand Prix E3. Goes to show that Tom Boonen is always on form when he wants to be.
Study of concentration if you take a close look at those faces, as they just try to keep the pace high and also hold position. No reason to worry too much, but again, they've closed down just a little bit. 8:16, it's more or less locked just now. 103 kilometers left to go. That's still a long way to go to the finish, especially with the roads that lie ahead, including the Mur de Grammont. where there is a massive crowd, and they're treated to the luxury of a huge television screen on top of the climb as well, so they can continue to watch. Into Oudenaarde now, and Paul, what's this famous for?
Well, if you ever get a chance to come here into Oudenaarde, this is actually the home, Phil, of the Museum of the Ronde van Vlaanderen. It's an amazing place to come and visit. They've got souvenirs, they've got old cars that used to follow the race. They've got a nice old Peugeot 404 that used to belong to the team that followed Eddy Merckx. And it's a very worthwhile visit if you're out for a ride in this part of the world.
Absolutely, it's a historian's delight. They've got cobblestones from the actual route with the names of the winners engraved on them. You can walk on them. Even as you enter the museum, you walk over cobblestones, and that's deliberately done. And it's well worth a visit if you get into Belgium, even when it's not the time of the Ronde van Vlaanderen. It's a year-round opening, that museum, by the way. Rabobank still continuing to set the pace here and keep life hard at the front.
Rider's just been over that river, you might have noticed there, the Schelde, a river which cuts Belgium almost in half. In the French language it's called the Lescaut, and there's a big race there, the Schelde Prize. You can see the very heart there of Oudenaarde. The riders making their way through. They're not too far away from the Ronde van Vlaanderen Museum. In fact, it's just over to the left-hand side once they've gone through the town square.
This is quite a big industrial town here. Oudenaarde in Belgium also has its own racing during the season, professional criterium racing here. Still 8 minutes 13 the gap. And the barriers are out here to keep the crowds back, and the race is now in full cry. Still those 7 riders dictating the pace, and our cameras seem to be of the opinion far more interesting to watch the action within the peloton here, because they know it's sooner or later somebody is going to launch an attack out of this big pack and change the whole shape of this bunch.
Yes, well, once they start riding in the hills, in the small bergs as they call them here in Belgium, you'll see that leading group, Phil, of 7 riders lose 30 to 45 seconds on each individual climbs. That makes up to 8 minutes very, very quickly.
This is the German team on the front, Team Wiesenhoff-Felt, and it's being led today by Stefan Wessermann, who's been a great classics rider. What's going on down there?
That's the Kermis. That's the Kermis, the town square in Oudenaarde, resplendent for the usual Easter time feasts that they have in this part of the world. And just there, you can actually see the riders there, Phil, going past the museum. The museum is just there on the right-hand side with the brown roof. So now you know where it is. You need to get yourself down there sometime and have a look and check it out. I gave the German commentators a bit of a giggle this morning because at the start I saw Stefan Wessermann, and I said to the German commentators, I see they've got a new rider on Wiesenhoff, Stefan Wiesenhoff, and they thought that was quite hilarious. But it's good to see Stefan, a former winner, in fact the last German rider to win this race, still racing. I thought he was going to retire towards the end of last season, but I think he decided to give it one more go.
2004, only 2 riders have won for Germany throughout the whole history of the Tour of Flanders, and we're now on the 91st edition today. But he's also come close to picking up Paris-Roubaix as well. He finished 2nd in that in 2002. And he's won the peace race. The peace race is that what was formerly the Eastern Bloc nations that linked Berlin in Germany, Eastern Germany, Prague in Czechoslovakia, and Warsaw in Poland. He's won the peace race 5 times, which I think might be a record.
Certainly was very dominant. There is another former East German rider moving up to the front in the pale blue. That is Eric Zabel, just over to the right-hand side. Zabel, I think, will be looking to do a fine ride here this afternoon. You can see everybody stretching out. T-Mobile riding together. I think they would like to see their man Burkhardt do a good performance here this afternoon, because he's ridden very well in the 3 days of La Panne and last weekend too. The riders crossing back over the Schelde, and that's the river and canal that you can see just behind them. This is Kevin Hulsmans on the front now. He's completely and utterly doing all of the work here, Phil, I think, for Team Quickstep this afternoon, because now we're looking at around about 7 kilometers till the riders get to the Klausberg, and about 20 kilometers before they get to the Old Quaremont, which is when I think we'll see this main field split up to a smaller group of 40 or 50 riders.
Kevin's setting the pace here to take them through towards the next climb. 8 minutes to gap, coming down slightly. Zabel in a brilliant position, I have to say. This grand man of professional cycling. This is one race which has eluded him throughout a career, which has seen him triumph in races like Milan-San Remo. His best ever finish in Flanders is 4th. It happened a couple of years ago when he really was in the hunt for the victory. He lost out in the sprint. You know, if the cards fall right again, he is another man you can never discount. Eric is riding fantastically well. He was 6th in Milan-San Remo, and he's already, well, he's only a couple of months away from his 37th birthday.
Well, normally you would expect a race like the Tour of Flanders to smile on the older riders. It nearly always has done. Johan Museeuw won this race at a very elderly age. So did André Schmiel. The man who I suppose beats that completely out of the water is Tom Boonen, who at 26 years of age has already won this race twice.
Well, he's been a star since 20 years of age, Tom Boonen. And that's, we tend to think of him as an old man. His life's hardly begun as a professional cyclist. Now it's trouble here for Jimmy Casper. The sprinter, he's dropping back to his team car, I think, with questions like, where can I stop today?
Well, Casper's also had a pretty good start to the season. He's had himself a victory so far, and that was very early on. He won the race, the Fay-le-Franc race, and he won the overall classification in the Tour of West Flanders. Now there is number 31 slipping up through the main field, and that is Stuart O'Grady. So I would think he's been to the backfill with a mechanical incident, and that is the chaos that the riders have to battle with all day.
Well, he's used to traffic bike-wise, O'Grady, because he was a great bunch rider on the velodromes. That's how he learned his trade. Coming from Adelaide, he's part of the Australian track squad before he turned to road cycling with a great deal of success. He has a gold medal from Athens as well in the Madison. And so he'll be the best qualified, I think, to get his way through to the front. Just look into the, I think it was the Unibet car, just shot off into the bushes there. I hope it's okay, as it's Quick Step setting the pace here now at the front. Trying to see if I can pick up Peter van Petegem, because I can't believe that we will go through the commentary today without seeing Peter. He will try to go out on a high from his Tour de Flanders. He's won it before on, I think it's 2 occasions, and he was the man. And the race, of course, as always, goes to his hometown.
Yeah, in fact, I think every race goes through his hometown, Phil, because
indeed.
His hometown is called Brakel, and it really seems to be the epicenter of every bike race that goes on here. Het Volt goes through there, Brussels-Kern goes through there, the Tour of Belgium goes through there, Ronde van Vlaanderen goes through there.
Robin McEwen lives there.
Well, that's very important. In fact, there's a number of Australian riders live there. Nick Gates lives there too.
That's right. Incidentally, McEwen, we thought might have been a favourite today, because he really needs a big classic to his honours list before he retires. Had to pull out, he's not well, and so he'll hope to reassess the situation and come back a little bit later in the year, I think. But he made Milan-San Remo his first year's offering, and he finished 4th, so that wasn't a bad one.
Just been caught out completely and utterly. You're looking at that rider on the front there riding for T-Mobile, and I was looking to see him riding in a blue jersey. I'd forgotten completely that Servais Knaven had changed teams this winter.
You can always tell me it's the way he holds his bottom lip when he puts his head down, because he has this very strange crouch. He always tends to ride on the tops of his brake levers like that and just crunches his body over the top. But there's some very good riders now riding on Team T-Mobile, which is now the director sportif is an American, and trying to make it work overall. Bob Stapleton, the new boss of T-Mobile. But the man in the hot seat today, by the way, is Alan Piper, the Australian rider, who's guiding through the Tour of Flanders.
Well, he knows exactly where he's going. He lived in Belgium for an awful long time. In fact, he'd lived not very far from the finish line here. We're at the finish line in Merbeke, and Alan Piper used to live in the small town of Ninove, which is about 5 kilometers away from here.
Yes, Alan's former wife used to sell all the chips down the road here from the local friture stall. I'm not sure whether she's here today. There's the breakaway. Well, there were 3 of the names for you. This is the breakaway. It's all compact and back together. The rider who punctured, Garcia Acosta, is the rider on the front at the moment, so he's got himself back up to the leading group, no problems. The Chocolat Jacques rider, who's also here as well, as we're heading into Berchem now, which will take us towards the 3rd climb of the Gleisberg. And that rider there sitting at the back we just saw for the AG2R squad was Laurent Mangel. So this little breakaway group here, leaky gas going through, Alexander Krzyzinski nearest the camera, all working pretty solidly together. I often wonder what they think here, because it would be completely against the run of the history of this race if they were to stay away to the finish. And so they must be thinking, when are we going to get caught, rather than how far we're going to get before the finishing line.
They'll still hope for the moment with a gap of 7 minutes and 47 seconds. You know, this is not what the Belgians would call real Ronde van Vlaanderen weather here this afternoon. And in fact, a number of years ago, there was a very nice day like this, and the breakaway of 22 riders actually succeeded in going to the finish. And that would have to be, apart from the Frenchman, Jackie Durand, the only time there's really been a surprise win. On that occasion, it was René Martens.
Yes, and Jackie Durand, when he won, of course, he was in a long breakaway, and everybody thought it would never stay, and it did. One of those great moments, and he still remains one of the very few Frenchmen ever to triumph. Only 3 French riders have ever won this race, and Jackie Durand was the last Frenchman back in 1992. How the years fly by. There's Garcia Acosta looking quite relaxed, considering it all, and with him there the skill rider, and that is Martin Janlingi. Doesn't sound a very Dutch name, and I must confess I've never heard of him before today. He must be either a newcomer or he hasn't appeared in the Tour of Flanders before. I don't think, in fact, he has ridden before.
Well, he's not ridden at this level, but he actually has a number of pretty good wins to his name in the smaller races. I saw him riding towards the end of last year. It's actually a team skill which has had a fair amount of success, and they've caused an upset on 1 or 2 occasions.
They've earned their wildcard invite because they have, as Paul said, they've won quite a few races, especially early in the year last year. They were very prominent, and that's got them wildcards into some of the bigger races right now. They're working, as they say, very regular at the moment. And Martin Janlingi, by the way, he is a Dutch rider, turned pro back in 2003. So he's had about 7 wins to his credit. Not all of them big races. He started off with the Marco Polo team.
He started off racing a long way overseas, but in fact he won the stage of the Tour of Belgium last year, and that was the stage into Ostend. And he actually took the overall victory in that event, and he won the Tour of Guangjai Lake towards the end of last season as well.
Which is one race we've yet to see, but I'm told by the riders who go there it is a superb bike race and very well organised, and they do like invitations to that event. It's in China, by the way.
Well, these riders now will be thinking about what's up next on the menu for them this afternoon. That's going to be the Klausberge, a smooth climb of around about 1 kilometre. The steepest part is 14.5 kilometres, and basically what's happened here, Phil, is we've ridden along the valley of the Schelde. These riders will turn to the left and go over the small hills of the Mont de l'Enclos, and that side is called the Klausberge. They'll turn around and then crisscross back over again on the climb called the Knokteberg. It's probably the only way you can get a large number of climbs into Belgium, zigzagging this small chain of hills down through the Flanders.
Well, another story and another fall here, Paul, as we now see
Cancellara.
that Cancellara is the one lying down, I think. No, that's Lars Mikkelsen on the floor.
Yep.
And with him here is Cancellara. The other rider is Klostergaard. 3 of them going down all together. That's amazing.
Well, they got caught there at the side of the road in what we call Death Valley. The side of the road, you can see this is a smooth concrete road, but just at the side, on the left-hand side there, you could see there was a little bit of cobblestones, and Cancellara went down. There he is wearing number 35. Doesn't seem to be too flustered at all. He obviously didn't go down very hard at all. He's got a teammate alongside him to try and pace him back into the main field. The guy that stopped with him was Marcus Lovquist, but in fact Lars Mikkelsen did go down rather hard.
Yes, he fell probably worst of the 3 there. Well, they were obviously all riding together, looking after Cancellara, and they all finished up on the deck. But you're right, he looks as though he's okay. It's a matter of getting back into the action as fast as possible. Maybe we can see this on the far right of the road, actually. No, it's not. It's on the far left. They've gone down into Death Valley, come off that white line into the cobbles. That's Lars on the right. Cancellara not too, but there's 4 of them. You're right, there's 4 of them down there.
4 riders from CSC all involved in that. That's because, Phil, they were actually riding together. You can see Lovquist now, number 33, is pacing his man Cancellara up. Cancellara is obviously in pretty good form here this afternoon because there's no panic at all. He knows he can catch back to the main field, but he wants to get back using the least possible energy. Absolutely.
Well, the 4 fallers then were Lundqvist, Cancellara, Klostergaard and Mikkelsen, and now we have a tremendous pile-up just as Cancellara is coming back into the fray. He'll get round this and continue to chase. This is amazing, Paul, in weather conditions like this.
Well, this is very often the case. You see a lot of riders are feeling quite fresh. They realise we're coming up to the next climbs. Now, just look at this. You've got a number of cars parked over on the right-hand side. Riders taking the risks to go behind the parked cars, and then all of a sudden, a deck of cars right in the middle. But again, the most dangerous part, Phil, it's around about 50th place, which is why everybody fights to stay in the top 30.
Well, I don't think you can blame those vehicles. They're publicity vehicles on the right, but there's nobody near those vehicles. They again collided within. They imploded once more.
Well, there's some
And
damage being done, though.
This is a Case de Pan rider here.
He's gone down very hard indeed.
Yes, and in fact, I'm pretty sure that rider was looking a little bit rough, to say the least, right now.
Another CSC rider involved in that crash as well. CSC not having a lot of luck. That was close to guard.
That's the second time in as many minutes for close to guard. And who is this?
Well, I'm just having a look to see which rider from CSC.
It looks like Mikkelsen again. It's very difficult to see under that crash helmet.
Well, that could be Matti Breschel or Alan Johansson, who's gone down like that.
His saddle is completely twisted off.
Yeah, that was a very hard climb there. The doctor up alongside him. These doctors do an unbelievable job here in these races. They're straight up alongside these riders. The rider from Rabobank has had a problem there as well. That's Joost Postuma, second overall in the 3 days of Le Panne. He's obviously out of the Tour of Flanders for the moment.
The rider from Lambau Credit over here sat on the road as well. And I didn't quite see the third digit of his number there, but he certainly won the riders in trouble, and I would think it's possibly James van Landschoot. Meanwhile, back at the front, we are now on the Kleisberg here. These are the leaders of the day, and they're hitting it with a 6:41 advantage, and will be totally unaware of what is happening behind, and it's going to be in their favour. Although, having said that, the gap is continuing now to come down.
Down pretty dramatically. You know, although it doesn't look very fast at the front end of the main field, they're actually setting a fairly mean tempo. This is the small town of the Enclus, and this is a little resort area. A lot of the French and the Belgian people come to at the weekends. The Mont de l'Enclus. These riders are crisscrossing over it. They'll drop down into the valley on the far side, into the town of Aurois, ride for about 4 kilometers before taking a left-hand turn again to come up the Konocterberg, which I always found a horrendous climb, because it's one of those climbs that starts off and gradually gets steeper all the way to the summit.
6:37, 92 kilometers still to ride, but that's for the leaders. You can go back probably another 5 or 6 kilometers at least, probably 7 kilometers to the pack still, and add that on. So about 99 kilometers for the main field, and still plenty of chance for them to swing a little bit of a surprise today. Here's the peloton, and look again, they're taking risks going down what is the pedestrian walkway there as they go through on the inside. This peloton is definitely going down in size. There must now be quite a lot of riders chasing, and quite a lot of riders have called it a day after these quick succession of crashes.
The very tempting thing, I have to say, and I'm actually saying this from experience too, Phil, is when you ride this race, once you start to head back towards the finish town of Meerbeke, there's always the temptation to actually just go straight on, because the race from here on back to the finish line actually zigzags, and you're never really very much more than 25 kilometers away from a very nice warm shower.
Well, it's always tempting, even when the weather's as beautiful as it is today. I can see Oscar Freire is trying to pop into the picture off to our right there in the Rabobank colours, so he's got himself well pegged. So too the champion of the Netherlands, Michael Bogaert. He's there with that red top to his jersey, and I think Philippe Gilbert is also here.
Philippe Gilbert is a man that they're calling the Flemish Walloon, because he's such a good rider in these northern classics. A little bit of a problem here. Just to look at exactly what is going on. This is one of the riders trying to get himself back into the race here. This is Bert Roelms. He's a very big rider. You know, he's almost 6'5", this man. He's a very strong bike rider. I've seen him do a lot of work for riders like Robbie McEwen.
But see how unlucky he is, Paul, because unlike Cancellara, who was up and was able to get back pretty quickly, these boys were left in the road for a little bit too long, and now they're having to work on it. Poor old Servais Knaven in the pink there. Moments ago we saw him riding at the front. Now he's fallen and he's chasing at the back. That's how fortunes change in the Ronde van Vlaanderen. It's a race for very, very special people, this. Very difficult to hold position and stay out of trouble.
Well, the motorbike here giving us just exactly what kind of gap those riders have got to try and bridge, but it's all having an effect on the breakaway, because it's now down to 6 minutes and 20 seconds. And it is basically the main field just rising their impetus, and they're getting faster and faster as they got to what they see as starting to become the more strategic parts of this race.
Little chance for a quick intake of food here, and an assessment of just who is in the breakaway and who is missing. Johan van Summeren is up here. He's all right, the big boy in the Predictor Lotto colours. Predictor Lotto don't really have a winner for this, except of course with Leif Host. If they can keep him up near the front, he's had 2 second places in the Tour of Flanders in the past, and he would have been here working for Robbie McEwen, but McEwen, as I said earlier, not riding, so it's up to Host today to fly the flag.
O'Grady there on the right-hand side, still looking very comfortable, being followed and shadowed there by Oscar Freire. They'll have a hard job getting rid of Oscar Freire. He's so attentive here this afternoon, Phil. I think that this man is looking to put in the best ever Spanish performance. But while we were having a little bit of excitement at the back there, I was just thinking, you were talking about the Dutch national champion Michael Bogaard. I find it very hard to believe that the Dutch have not won this race since 1986, and that was Adrie van der Poel who on that occasion sadly beat our mate Sean Kelly.
Yes, that was a tragedy for Sean, because Sean never got to win this event, and it was one he always wanted to win. He was second and third, but he never got the victory he wanted. And the big spoiler was Adrie van der Poel in 1986, and in fact the Dutch riders having won it 9 times so far, which for the Dutch on what we would see as typically Dutch roads is a bit strange, really.
Long way behind the Belgians, with 64 victories for the Belgians, and nearly all of those, I would say, are Flemish victories as opposed to Belgian victories.
That's right, they won't be the French-speaking Walloon riders. It's a bit too tough, different style of riding, really. Little chance to move up and get position again here now, as the riders start to reshuffle here and recover. A knot of colour down below our helicopter today. There's the chance to have a look at the new colours of Cofidis there. Looks like, is it David Miller there on the left? Not too sure, I don't think it was.
Just looking across here, you can see the faces of all these riders, Phil, now starting to get that little bit more concentrated, paying a lot more attention to exactly what is going on at the front end of the main field. There is Michael Bogaard in the middle in red, white and blue. He could put in a fine performance here this afternoon if everything worked out right for him. He's the kind of rider who could do well in the Tour of Flanders, but for him, he thinks a lot more, of course, about the Amstel Gold Race in a couple of weeks' time.
Gerolsteiner sending men up to the fore. Watch out for Estana Worth. I've just seen Jiminy Cricket moving up on the right there. Paolo Bettini just squeezing through on the curb side. If our camera moves to the right, you'll see him in the white jersey, as he also is now planning, because they're now all getting a little bit twitchy now, the Knokteberg and then the Quaremont. So you really must again get to the front if you want to stay in the action.
That's what it's all about. It really is the safest place to be if you can ride in the first 25 to 30, but it takes a lot of energy and a lot of nervous energy to do that, to stay up there all of the time. Well, this man from Quick-Step Fit has done his job for this afternoon, Steven de Jong. Not surprising, we saw him do a lot of pacemaking, and now his job done. I think he will be, as you see Achteraan van der Peloton, the rear end of the main field, I think he will be looking for the shortcut home.
Well, he's a Dutchman, he knows the roads pretty well. He had a good start to the year, finished third in the Tour of Qatar over in the Arab Emirates, and I must say that the riders over there enjoy that race. Very rich pickings, totally flat, high winds and plenty of sand, but
lots of camels.
And lots of camels. All of them getting the hump, I'm sure. Looking down at the big peloton again, 5:47, the gap now inside 6 minutes, 87 kilometers to run for the leaders. That's just 55 miles from the finish. And we're getting to the real nitty-gritty now of the Ronde van Vlaanderen. The Knokteberg, followed by the Old Quaremont, then the Peterberg and the Kortekeer. Going to be put under the utmost pressure.
Beautiful day of racing. Again, this was a rider who was involved in a crash earlier on. This is Staff Sheerlink. He's a good rider, Staff Sheerlink. He didn't have a great reputation as an amateur, but they took a risk on him and brought him into Team Cofidis. He's been hovering at the back end of the main field, and I think, in fact, Steven de Jong just managed to recover there and get himself back into the peloton.
Oh, good for him. He must have slipped off on the last climb, but he's come back off. Au revoir. Which will take us now onto a further stretch of cobblestones as we're heading now towards hill number 4.
These guys are starting to put the pressure on. It doesn't look, when you go down to the front end of the main field, as if they're really going very fast, but when you see the main field stretched out in a long line like that, you know that the pressure is starting to come on. The Kop van der Weegstraat, this is the front end of the race, and this, Phil, is the start of the Knokteberg for the leading group of 7 riders. And as you can see, as I explained just a little earlier, it starts off nice and smoothly, but then it gets steeper and steeper. So it's a kind of climb that you can't really have a run at.
And just looking at the group here, Paul, I think we were given a wrong number earlier. It wasn't Johan Koenen, it's Steven Kathoven who is in here for Chocolat Jacques. A much better prospect, Kathoven, and much more firepower in his legs. He's riding pretty well for the time of the year.
Well, Kathoven, again, there's a problem at the back here, and I think this again is one of the riders from Predict or Lotto, and he too has had a serious problem there. That is Roy Sentjens, who stopped at the side of the road. A quick rear wheel change for him. He's been changed there by his own team mechanic, who will have exactly the right wheel to go into the rear end of the machine, and you see how much quicker that wheel change was than the one we saw happen earlier on. Now look how to do it. You don't panic, you look behind you, wait until your team car is right there, you stay relaxed all of the time. Once you see the car pull up behind you, you get off the bike then, and then try and take out the wheel yourself.
That's right, and you probably noticed the small drinks and fluids pushed into his back pocket at the same time. Load your man up while you've got the opportunity. He should get back okay. 5:47 now. Back with the leaders again. 2 on 4 sat at the back is David Boucher of the Lambau Credit. New colours for them this year.
This is Konokterberg, and it's a maximum of 13.3%, and sadly for these riders, Phil, that's right up at the top. It's only an average of 7.3, but it's fairly long climb at 1.26 kilometers in length. Looking off in the distance there, by the way, you're actually looking off into France, the northern part of France, which is why this area is very much frequented by a lot of the French cyclists at the weekend.
Good training roads in Belgium, because these roads don't carry much traffic at all at weekends, or even in the week, come to think of it, and there's plenty of cycling goes on all week in Belgium. There's usually plenty of races around, especially on Tuesdays and Thursdays. You can always watch a professional bike race somewhere. Well, we're just about halfway, or maybe coming to the top of the climb here. Meanwhile, back in the field, it looks like we've got more problems here. Riders wanting a little bit of mechanical adjustment, perhaps.
And a crash again. AG2R have gone down. Gerolsteiner have gone down. Phil, everybody, I think, today is very nervous indeed. As you can see, this rider is going down at the side of the road for AG2R. He really went down hard.
He's hurt his wrist by the look of it, and his day is done. It looked as though it could have been Martin Elmiger, and I hope it wasn't, who was the brilliant winner of the Tour Down Under in Australia this year for AG2R.
You see the chaos.
It's René Dion.
You can see the chaos at the back end of the main field. He went down very hard indeed, and he's got a pretty sore wrist now as we go back to this leading group of riders. The gap now inside of 6 minutes, Phil, very comfortably inside of 6 minutes with 85 kilometers to go. You see how this Konokterberg is starting to get just that little bit steeper. It really is a beast of a climb. Once you go over the top of it, you actually just touch into the Ronde van Vlaanderenstraat, the street of the Tour of Flanders. Take a left-hand turn, then drop back down into the outskirts of the town of Klausbergen, and then it's the start of the Oude Quaremont.
And that's a cobble brute. Brings us up to the little pub and coffee shop on the top. These are the riders, though, who have set the pace today from an awful long way out now at 151 kilometers to go, which is some 70 kilometers since. They had 12 minutes advantage. 70 kilometers further on the road, they've still got 5 minutes and 38 seconds of it. Flag of Great Britain there, the Union flag being waved. There's a couple of British riders in the race today. Also flying their flag, Steve Cummings, Roger Hammond and David Miller.
Well, this is the top of the climb. A sigh of relief for all of these riders, Phil, as they've got themselves up here. Garcia Acosta in the dark black jersey there of Castellpagne, Lille Baleares, and here is the main field, and they too will very shortly be starting the Konokterberg. But I think you'll see them take a much more serious interest in the Old Quaremont. It's a climb that a big strong rider like Eric Zabel or of course Tom Boonen would like just to test their legs for the first time, to get rid of a lot of riders before they go to the very complicated climb that follows it, the climb of the Paterberg.
A little bit more urgency again at the front now as Française de Jeu drive on. Philippe Gilbert, I think, is their man that they hold hope for. He is a Belgian. We often think of him as French, but he's very much a Belgian who rides on a French team. Had 7th place just last week in the Grand Prix E3, which is one of the warm-up races for the Tour of Flanders. So he is a man who has the capabilities of producing a good ride in this event. He won Het Volk last year as well. So he loves this area of France, which is unusual because he's a Walloon, isn't he?
He certainly is. He's from the Wallonie, the French-speaking part of Belgium. I'm a little surprised so far, Phil, to see what I regard as being a major absence of the Italians from the front end of this field, because we are coming to the very difficult next climb of the day, Knokterberg, followed by the Old Quaremont. And the Italians leading up to this race struck me as being the force to be reckoned with, because, of course, Pozzato is in great form. You've got as well Balan, who's just won the 3 days of La Panna. These riders, I thought, would be much more to the front, but that's the important thing as well as of riders like Stuart O'Grady. They know where to ride in a race like this.
But there is a tight shot of the peloton, and it's down to about 100 riders. Half the field that rolled away from Bruges Marketplace at about 9:45 this morning. And now we're getting on to the next climb of the day, 84 kilometers. Still to ride, but what an 84 kilometers. Watch out for Eric Zabel. He's right at the front here. He's just peeping into the left of our picture in that blue jersey of Team Milram at the moment. And we'll just see now if he's planning to try and open up a gap. He's certainly in a great position to go with any move. All of the new yellow jerseys at the back are the new Tinkoff Credit Systems team. But looking at their team today, I don't think, possibly the one exception will be Ignatieff, but this isn't a team for this race, I don't think.
Well, just having slammed the Italians, Phil, I just saw Alessandro Balan moving up to the front end of the main field. You can see Balan in the Lampre jersey there.
Sitting at the back here, Bert Grabsch. As a man who's obviously been waiting around a long time to see the riders go by, as here they are, Française de Jeu on the front, followed by the T-Mobile riders too. They have a good player too in their end of term signing from last year, Roger Hammond, who might ride well today. Marcus Berghardt is the man setting the pace, the big tall man. Servais Knaven sadly is gone now. We saw him working well. They have another rider on form in Kim Kirken, the champion of Luxembourg. Haven't seen anything of him. Roger Hammond, I know, will be planning on a big ride here today, and he's done it before in Flanders.
He certainly has. He loves these races in this part of the world. Just sitting at the back there, the rider from Crédit Agricole, Cyril Lemoine. But it's what's happening at the front end of the main field that I think is much more important. You can see how steeply this climb is starting to reveal the French and Belgian countryside in the back. In the orange jersey there, just to the right-hand side, Oscar Freire is looking very comfortable indeed, as the time gap now, Phil, comes down to around about the 5-minute mark. And I think those riders in the front, that leading group of 7, they'll now start to feel just a little bit fragile.
Well, two tired men dragging themselves back up, or are they losing ground here? Certainly one of them is the Crédit Agricole rider Cyril Lemoine.
And that was Nikolai Trusov as well. I was surprised to see him going backwards.
Almost
again,
to a standstill here, Paul. In fact, we are to standstill.
Somebody's gears have come off there.
Right in the middle. And that was, I think, that was Bodrogi. Is it on the right here?
Well,
no, it's not. It's Jimmy Engoulevent.
And just over to the left, in fact, still in contention is Steven de Jong. You see, de Jong will not give up at all. And again, it just accentuates the point why you must ride at the front end of the main field, because there's no problem at all in the first 15 to 20 places. And all of this slowing down, then having to start and get going again, really eats into your body reserves during the end of the day.
Trusov and Lemoine have got back into the group there, courtesy of the slowing down as they reassess the climb. Lampre now getting themselves up into the front, and that's just about on cue now, because they'll be looking for Alessandro Balan and try and get him into the thick of the action here at the most crucial stage of the race so far. We're now just on 5 minutes. Slowly but surely that time is disappearing on our screens as the cheers go for the T-Mobile boys setting the pace.
I tell you what, Freire at this stage of the game is looking like a very dangerous man. He's always there in his orange jersey of Team Rabobank, never far away from the front end of the peloton. Neither too is Stuart O'Grady, I've seen being very present at the front end of the peloton. This is where he certainly would not want to be, in the chaos which is the back end of the field.
Well, this is hang on to the saddle in front of you, I think, just now, as pace gets a little bit tough. But they're over the top of the climb anyway. 50 miles, 80 kilometers left to run here. And we're looking at a slight increase in the gap there, 5-10 seconds.
That's not much. That'll get slashed quite a bit once we start the approach to the Old Quaremont, because there will be a fight there. This is where the riders here, Phil, are turning onto the Old Quaremont, the Ronde van Brandenstraat. heading them way up to the main field, and they'll take a left-hand turn down into the town of Klausbergen, and they will really start to turn on the pressure now to make sure that they get to the start of the Old Quaremont in the first 10 places, because the Old Quaremont is a very narrow climb. It's cobbled to begin with, and then it levels out at the top. I find sometimes the toppest part of that climb is a lot more difficult because it's a false flat of cobblestones for around about 1.5 kilometers. A little bit easier today, though, I have to say, Phil, because there's not really that much wind.
And there is the monument of Karel van Veenendaal. Well, I'm afraid the significance is above me. He certainly wasn't a rider in the Tour of Flanders, so I'll have to apologise for that one. 5 minutes, 12 seconds.
See them getting very
look at the way
keen now.
T-Mobile have got control of this. This is not a race to catch the breakaway now. This is a race to the turn where they enter the narrow road of the Quaremont, where the leaders are here. You see how narrow this road is, hardly the width of a car. And they'll hit the cobbles, and it's very, very hard indeed. It is actually a very steep climb, this one, as the riders now in the breakaway have no worries in the world.
Well, it's 11.6% at the steepest part, and this climb is the steepest at the bottom. It's 2.2 kilometers in length, and it's a very difficult once you get to the top. But these guys will not have to fight like they will fight in the front end of the main field, because there's not too much for them to worry about finding an ideal place. Here's the start of the cobblestones, and what a great crowd you're going to see in a couple of kilometers' time once we get up towards the summit.
Yes, this is narrow and twisty now, and the cameras sadly belie just how steep this climb is. The rider on the right there diving for a little bit of help on the road is Stephen Keethoven. Oh, and there's been another crash back in the field here about 6 kilometers down the road, and riders sat all over the place here, 1 or 2 lying down. This has been quite a shunt.
This is chaos. This is, I don't think, Phil, I've ever seen a Tour of Flanders where there's been so many accidents. I'm just trying to see how that happened. It was in the straight line. There's a number of riders gone down. Française de Jeu is down there. There's a rider down there as well from Leaky Gas, and this rider from Gerolstein. This, in fact, is Fabian Wegman, who's gone down very hard.
And that's rather a nasty cut there, too, for the Française de Jeu rider. He needs a little bit of help there. Another rider sat on the floor, too, is Manuel Mori. There's a lot of riders down here.
It's amazing.
Lambau Credit have lost a man. Leaky Gas have lost a man, and these guys are not going to continue, that's for sure. And one of the other riders on the far left of the road there is Manuela Cinziato, so that's a loss of a strong Italian as well.
Well, it was, strangely enough, Phil, it was in a straight line when this crash went down.
Is that Zabel? No.
That's
Eric
Zabel has gone down too.
Oh, well, that's a real shame, and this means that this must have happened very close to the front of the race here. So this is Eric Zabel is on the floor, and also down there, I think that rider from Wiesenhof is Sebastian Gilling.
Well, Phil, I really cannot figure out, Phil, how that accident happened. And I know this road, it's a very straight piece of road. The riders were going down at high speed, and all of a sudden something must have gone round to take out so many riders like this. But, you know, these guys now will have been racing to get to the Old Quaremont, which is such an important part of the road. I'm looking here to see how Eric Zabel is.
Zabel's hurt. He's either hurt his back or he feels he might have cracked a rib the way he was trying to breathe there. Stefan van Dijk also down, and very stunned indeed. That was a very heavy fall and quite unusual on such a straight stretch of road. Meanwhile, coming towards the top of the Quaremont with the leaders, remember. The peloton are flat out to try and get entry here at the front. Gap is now down inside 5 minutes.
A strange thing about this situation is, as we look at this leading group of 7 riders, that crash is actually only about a kilometre away from them as the crow flies, just over to the right-hand side on that road that descends down into Klausbergen.
And so, as we see the riders here now on the cobblestones at the breakaway of 7. And I can tell you, in fact, that while we're commentating on the men's race, the women have just crossed the finishing line in the Tour of Flanders, and Nicole Cook of Great Britain has won clearly and increases her lead in the World Cup competition. But we're looking here now at the men as they head towards the climb of the Haute Quaremont. And this is going to be a tremendous assault on a narrow road. They're going to have to fight to hold position here now.
Well, there's the man you've been looking for on the right-hand side, Peter van Petergem. He knows this road and this race, Phil, to absolute perfection. As we look at the leaders here, we're now finally on exactly the same stretch of road. The leaders are just leaving the Old Quaremont as the main field is starting it. But isn't that quite remarkable? Because all of a sudden, we wonder where Peter van Petegem is. Is he in the race anymore? Then when he needs to be at the front, boom, there he is.
Exactly right, and he's a man with all of the experience. As Van Petegem, he's the dark rider, dead centre of picture here. And he's in a perfect position now because all of these boys at the front are holding the road locked off. There's nobody can get up to them now. Van Petegem will be very happy with this situation. Johan van Summeren is on the left.
Yeah, the white jersey and the green shorts is Baden Cook as well, and he's riding very well to the front end. Paolo Bettini's not far away, and there's Tom Boonen over to the right-hand side. You see, Phil, these riders take this race, this climb, very seriously indeed. It's 80 kilometers to go at the bottom of this climb, but for these riders, they know now that the hostilities are really about to begin.
Well, I think Cook is going to be pretty pleased with his escapade so far, because he's got himself up with the leaders at the most crucial stage of the race. And Van Petegem, well, a two-time winner. He was fourth last year. And then the week after disqualified from third place in Paris-Roubaix, which many would say was a rather hard decision by the race referees after that level crossing railroad incident.
Yes.
There we are, there's the statistics again on the Old Quaremont. Only a maximum of 11.6%, but this is a tough climb. And the peloton on narrow roads, if you have a problem now, then you're not going to get any help from your team cars.
The only chance you have of any help on a road like this is actually from your teammates, and that's why it's important to have a very strong team. If you have a mechanical incident now and you're one of the race or team leaders, you can only hope that a teammate is close by you and can pass across a wheel.
Well, Cookie there in the white jersey is dodging wheels and trying to keep in contact. Not too much of a problem at the moment. As they continue to set the pace, it's T-Mobile driving this.
Van Summeren up there in third place. Not yet the major sort out. You know, the most difficult part, this climb here, Phil, is so steep that everybody really is riding at the same speed. But the power comes in once you go over the summit of the climb, and then you start to really use that big gear.
And the boys in blue there, Bonen and Bettini, are locked in just behind a couple of teammates doing the work. So they are very closely in contention as well, as they come up off the cobblestones towards what is a false summit here on the Old Quaremont. They'll keep the pressure on. It's a pity we can't see the damage being done behind, but you can see the crowd here now. They know where to come to see the first foundation stones laid as you head towards the finish. 76 kilometers to go. For the moment, we've lost our little time check there. Oh, it's back. 4:25. The gap is closing. T-Mobile trying to dictate affairs.
Well, you see what's happened on this single climb here. They've wiped away a minute of that advantage. It is, in fact, an incredible tunnel of noise these riders are going through here as they come up to the summit of the steep part of the Old Quaremont, but this is not the finish. This is when, for me, it really does start to get hard. This is the false flat. Just over to the left-hand side with the golden helmet on there of Team Wiesenhoff in the green and white is Stefan Weissermann.
Yeah.
Not bad for an old boy, still up at the front.
Well, he knows how to ride at the Tour of Flanders, and that's the big thing. A past winner. We've seen other past winners up here, including Bonen and Van Petegem. Life at the back a little bit rough here for Nikolai Trusov from Credit Systems, Tinkoff Credit Systems. And these riders also now trapped by their own team cars and can't make any progress just for the minute. 76 kilometers to go. More riders losing contact, a number sadly including Eric Zabel with the crash.
Well, you can now start to see how this race gets very difficult on the flatter part here. It's still T-Mobile really ripping up. Look at Paolo Bettini over there on the right-hand side in the white jersey, riding like a true world champion, pushing the crowd to the side and getting themselves into the grass. He's looking for the smoothest part of the road, but you already noticed last time we saw from the helicopter, Phil, that there was a gap starting to appear in the main field here, and that's because of the pressure that's being set on at the front end of this group.
Well, Bettini seems to be making a world of space for himself down there just now. He just keeps an eye on everybody who's coming up on his shoulders, see who they are as we begin to pan down. And then you see it's a very small peloton before daylight begins. Johan van Summeren stepping on the gas on the right here. He's having a great race right now, the man from the Lotto squad.
And Bettini is too. Bettini moving up into 5th place. Weissermann up into 4th place in his green and white jersey. And He's riding exceptionally well here, the former world champion. Tom Boonen not too far away either. Also now you can see the Italians of Lampre moving up to the front end of this group, but you can see the damage is starting to be done. And they're trying to do this to get rid of as many riders as possible before the start of the next climb, which is the Paterberg, which is a 20% gradient climb. Although it's only very short, it can be very confusing.
There's still Burkhardt, I think, of Telecom setting the pace there at the front. When he's done a good ride up that climb, he's dragged this field into a long, thin line again. Back out onto the highway for the moment. 4:29 the climb. The old Quaramant is now history as we head towards the Paterberg. It's still a big peloton who's going to get itself together. Life is on the Paterberg now, I think, for the others. Here we go. This is the leading group. They're still all together. 20%, that's 1 in 5 in old money on the climb here, and that is steep. And these boys have only got to do it for 360 meters, so that's probably the only bit of light relief, and probably just as well here because Laurent Mangel is in a little bit of difficulty at the back.
Well, you can see the crowds here again because it's Easter weekend. I'd like to put a figure on the crowd by the end of the day. I reckon we could be looking at 750,000 people actually watching this race. And they've got the fans caged in on this occasion.
Well, the road is narrow to begin with, and what the fans get on there's no room for the race. So they're nice and orderly today, the Belgians, as the peloton tries to reform here. Riders hoping to get back quickly before they too reach the Paterberg and find themselves going off the back again. Gerolsteiner also, and Astana Worth up here. Frere still riding his own race there, doesn't seem to be bothered with anybody, but he's not losing ground. Neither is Michael Bogart. The big names of the peloton always hanging in the right positions. They're both off to the right of our picture here. There's How to Snatch a Bottle. Yeah, he got
that's
it too.
60 kilometers an hour, and that's the important thing. You've got to see a lot of, I would have to say, somewhat illegal and illicit feeding in the Tour of Flanders and Paris-Roubaix. The teams and the supporters will be all out on every occasion looking to see the possibility of getting a drink up to one of their riders, because it's such a complicated race to help your riders in, Phil, because it's difficult to actually travel around Belgium on the Tour of Flanders day because there's so many spectators scooting around as well, trying to get to the different parts of the course.
Well, all playing catch-up at the back now, while the peloton at the front is now under the control of some big names here. We've seen Van Petegem, Bonen, Zabel sadly has gone, and he won't get back. I think he's probably retired. He didn't look like he was going to continue, which is rather sad. 4.5 minutes the gap.
Fabian Cancellara now starting to make an appearance at the front end of the main field too, alongside Stuart O'Grady, who very much like Oscar Freire has looked very good for the whole of the afternoon. You can see them snaking down, but it's actually the old Quaramont today, Phil, has not had such an effect on the front end of the main field, and I think that's because there's not that much wind. There's hardly a breath of wind, and you know, when you've been to Belgium, you can probably count on the fingers of your hand how many days there is no wind in Belgium, and today I think is one of those days.
The trees are absolutely still here, mid-afternoon Belgium. Blue skies, and the start of what they say will be a very warm week, so that augurs well for the upcoming Ghent-Wevelgem Classic midweek, and then of course Paris-Roubaix, which isn't too far away from where we're commentating from, so reckon on the same weather. But meanwhile, the Tour of Flanders is yet to be decided, the 91st running of it. There's the long line. Half of this line just wants to try and stay in contact. The other half has got ambitions to break it up and try and win the race. And it's all in the first 20 or 30 riders, I think, as to where the winner will come from.
Well, they're all battling. You see the different movement of the front end of the main field. Everybody's trying to make sure they're in the ideal position for the start of the Paterberg, and that red, white and blue sign there is an indication that here is the start. There again, Bettini is over to the right-hand side.
Yes, and I'm just wondering if this one might be a little chance for him to do one of his famous springboard attacks here, as he starts to move to the front to set the pace. Baden Cook is over there on the left of our picture too. For the moment, dead centre, the second rider in blue, that is Peter Van Petegem. He's there. And I'm just trying to see who else we can see here right now, because it's such a narrow road. All the cheers for the world champion, where he should be, one would say, right at the front of the peloton on the climb. 4:13 the gap. It's going to keep coming down now as they approach the 4-minute margin.
There's Fabian Cancellara over to the left-hand side. He's also starting to take this a lot more seriously. Van Petegem is Mr. Tour of Flanders these days when it comes to experience. He's been up at the winning end of this race on a number of occasions. Bogert is up there as well, and you can see the chaos at around about 20th or 30th place. It's a good job it's a dry afternoon.
It is, because those riders in many cases are being brought to a standstill by the pace in the centre of the pack. They're not able to ride their own race, set their own rhythm. It's harder for them on many occasions than it is for Baden Cook setting the pace here at the front. But to be at the front, you've got to be strong to get there in the first place. In fact, Cookie is riding superbly today, Paul, because he's opened a gap on Bettini.
He's riding a good race here this afternoon. He's got big motivation. Obviously, a lot of pressure, I would think, on Team Unibet.com, Phil, because they need to show in races like this to try and convince, for example, some of their events in France to give them admission to their team, to their events.
Yeah, that's the point, and it would be nice to throw the gauntlet down right here, I suspect. And Baden Cook has never had a result in the Tour of Flanders before. Once again, we switch to the back of the race where the rhythm is being dictated to by others, and it's much more painful now. Still sitting on there, I think it is Adriano just here nearest camera right now.
And Berg Grabsch over on the left-hand side too. You can see just how difficult it is on these cobble climbs. So once you've lost your momentum, once you've lost your rhythm, it's almost impossible to keep going. You can see a lot of riders have not got the power to go over these climbs. They are so much more difficult than a climb with a smooth surface.
Hanging on in there, Adriano, grateful for every little push that comes his way just now. As he just about hangs on. He can see the banner at the top now, so final effort and keep it going. Rojas, who's back in the action after sickness, slipping off the back of the race there, I think. I don't think he'll be finishing today.
They've done a great job of organisation here, though, the organisers of the Tour of Flanders, making sure that it is as safe as possible for these riders. I can cast my mind back a little bit, Phil. I've rarely seen the Flanders looking quite so beautiful as they are this afternoon.
It has been a beautiful, beautiful springtime, and you're right, the trees are now green. It's all happened in the last 5 or 6 days, sun every day. Hard to imagine that at 7 o'clock this morning, driving to the start line, it was dense fog and the visibility was down to about 30 meters. But once the sun got to it, it blew away, and it was a clear start for the riders, which is the most important thing, I guess. But just in this breakaway, Stephen Keithoven, probably the best known of all of the riders in this leading group today. He's won already this year, as we now head to Kortekeer and the next climb of the day.
Tough climb as well, 17%, average gradient 6%, and it's 1,000 meters in length for these riders. But it is, fortunately, not a cobble climb. It's a fairly smooth climb, and they will be over the summit of that, heading down towards the second feeding station of the day, before, strangely enough, moving back into the outskirts of the Principality, the province of Oudenaarde.
7 runners, 7 riders, and there are all the names for you. And they're all been pretty equal in their task of keeping this pace well. But now we've gone inside 4 minutes, and the signs are not good. Another 20 kilometers perhaps, maybe with the 50 kilometers to go. We're going to see the riders all together again, and then you'll see a very, very different bike race.
Certainly, you can see now they've got over what they were worried about. They were worried about the Paterberg because it's a very difficult climb to maneuver, and I think we'll now see a little bit of a sense of normality moving back into the front end of the main field, as they will then start to wait for the steeper climbs down towards the end. And I think the next climb that will really worry these riders a lot, Phil, will be climb number 9, the Tyenberg, which is around about 16% at its steepest point, and that comes at around about 65 kilometers to go.
There's a big split in the peloton here as they try to recover too. As they scurry back up, they lost their ground on the old Quaremont, and there's a big pack join here, and they might get back this time at least, but then it'll all change again shortly. Well, the loss of Eric Zabel, I think, has left Team Milram a little bit of a wandering team now, because they were based around Milram today, around Zabel, and he's gone. And so I think they're just going to have to get what they can out of the race, sadly. Now, this is the Kortekeer, and this is the breakaway, and they still appear to be working okay together, but we're getting close to going inside 4 minutes just now.
Well, you can see these riders, they look to me, if you look at the style of the riders and the body language, they're actually starting to tell us that their bodies are starting to get just that little bit tired now, having been away in what the French call the échappée matinale, the early morning breakaway, and that's what this was. It was a hope that something would go wrong. It was a hope that they could build up 15 or 20 minutes and survive towards the finish, but they've seen their maximum advantage now of 12 minutes get shaved down to just 4.
Little bit of food for Mangel. Take what you can while you can. This is the second feeding station of the day today. The riders have now pedalled just on 190 kilometers. They've still got 69 to go. So there's no point in panicking in the breakaway. They just got to hope that the reaction will not be too swift and that they will have a little bit longer yet to bask in the glory of the afternoon sun in Flanders. Yesterday there was some 18,000 cyclists rode this route as part of their fun and games, how to spend Easter Saturday. Glorious day again. There were in that group too a lot of fallers. 1 or 2 people in our own hotel last night came home with their souvenirs of the cobblestones on their elbows, but they said it was a wonderful occasion. 18,000 cyclists riding the exact same route, but they did have to obey the traffic rules, and so they were stopped at traffic lights, etc. But they said it was 9 hours well spent.
It certainly was. The main field very shortly will be heading up the climb of Kortekeer. They'll take on their feed bags, and around about 3 kilometers later on, they go through the small town of Etikhoven, a long section of cobblestones at 2.1 kilometers, when they will then come to the next climb of the day, which is a very difficult climb at Steenbeekdries.
I just caught sight of Hausler there, Paul, at the back, so he's come back up in that group, which is rather nice. Here he is, just tagged onto the back. The faller earlier on looked as though he might have been out, fought his way back into the action. That's off.
That's the amazing thing, and that's the kind of rider, Phil, you have to be to do well in a race like the Tour of Flanders. You have to be courageous. You have to know that sometime during the day you're going to have bad luck. You don't take that on board. You just cast it to one side. Use your courage, dig deep and get up there and get back into the race, because you never know what can happen. It can turn around so quickly, the Tour of Flanders.
Oh, a little bit of a routine tactical riding now. The teammates on the front here of the rider in the breakaway, Enrico Franzoy of, not Lamprey, rather of Lambau Credit, David Boucher. Got a couple of teammates here now, so watch that clock count up a little bit now as they try to slow it down. There we are, we've gained a second already as we are onto the Kortekeer, and it's 6.4% average.
But fortunately, it's a smooth surface, a nice tarmac road, until we get down towards the end and we start to get the rather steeper climbs. Cancellara not too far away either, 10th to 12th place, just over to the left-hand side. He's a rider that many people tip for the win here this afternoon, and that would cause a bit of an upset here in Flanders, because I think probably 95% of people here on the finish line, Phil, want to see our Tommeke win.
I guess, but they might be disappointed. You never know. We've still got Stefan Weisman up here. We've got Cook. I think I've just seen Steen de Volder is also in this front group for Discovery Channel. He's their #1 hope today, and he's got himself well placed. So things are looking extremely good. As 4:18. So really, the pacemaking and defend riding by Lambau Credit hasn't worked, Paul, because these boys are in danger of actually closing the gap.
Yes, I think they're riding at the front end of the main field to get a little bit of publicity right now, and just hoping to see themselves on TV at the end of the day. Jiminy Cricket, or the world champion Paolo Bettini, just riding a little bit further back in around about 15th, 20th. You see these riders are not quite as worried about their positioning on the smooth surface climbs. It's the cobble climbs where they want to attack them in the first 10 or 12 places.
Just take a look at the face here of Johan van Summeren. A bit further back it was. We've gone back up to the leaders here as Mangel brings the leaders through. Oh, this is the back of the pack here. No, this is life at the back, I'm afraid, and that is Gert Stekmans from Quickstep. So they've lost a valuable pacemaker there, struggling. He may have been delayed by the crash. He's a pretty good rider. He's on form, riding pretty well this year, Stekmans.
There's so much action at the back end of the main field, riders moving forwards and backwards. You could have a bad moment on one of the climbs and see yourself getting dislodged, but for the team you will battle your way back through the main field as a rider from Milram moves up to the front here. I wonder if he knows that Eric Zabel is probably out of the race with that very nasty accident.
Climb number 7 for the leaders, Steenbeekdries. I told you they come thick and fast now, and the cobblestones don't get any smoother. And a little bit of pressure going on in the breakaway just now as they try to keep on and hold on to what they've got at 4:14. They haven't lost much between the last two climbs.
No, I think we'll start to wind up again once we get towards the Tyenberg and the Ekenberg, and that's when you'll see the main field start to whip up the pace again, and you'll see that clock at the top of the screen start to reduce in the size. 4:15 is what it is at the moment, but these riders now, Phil, are only 3 kilometers away from the Tyenberg, which is a tough climb at 16%. It's only it doesn't sound very much, does it, when you say it quickly, 530 meters, but when it looks like a brick wall in front of you, it's pretty horrendous and scary.
It is indeed, and hill number 8 is over and done with. 66 kilometers to go, about 43 miles, not very far at all for the riders in the Tour of Flanders, but all the racing is ahead. We're deep in Flanders now. These beautiful narrow roads, hardly any traffic on them all day long. Cyclists can come and enjoy themselves when it's not the race day, of course, and at this time of the year there are many big races in this area. The Kemmelberg will be included once again in the Gent-Wevelgem next Wednesday. Not once, but I think it's twice or 3 times. 3 times we go over it, that's right. 4:20 at the gap. A little bit of a problem here for the skill boy, Zhang Li.
Well, he's coming into the small town now, which is going to take him into the start of the Tyenberg. This cobblestone section here that we're going along will take us to the Tyenberg in a few moments' time. And this, strangely enough, this section of cobblestones here, Phil, is not even categorized. This is a freebie.
Oh, they throw that one in as a bonus. Here's life in the peloton on a good highway here, and riders coming back all of the time. Desperate moments, desperate chases, get back in the field, only to be left behind again on the next climb.
That's the bad thing. That's the horrendous thing psychologically about a race like this. You know, if you're a teammate in one of the big teams, that even if you do have a bad time, you've got to fight your way back in, because maybe you can save the victory for your team leader, who might have a flat tire at any moment, and the team car is not able to get there. Now Team Unibet have decided there's been a lull long enough to see whether or not they can shoot somebody off the front.
Well, I'm just wondering if this is Gorik Gardine who's having a go here as he gets clear of with Unibet.com. That's the first sort of attack we've had from the peloton. At the moment it's been a war of attrition.
It certainly has been very much of a war of attrition. He's leaping away on that section of cobblestones which links the big climb of Kortekeer to Stegendries. They've been through the feeding station, and now this man is hoping that there's going to be a little bit of a lull in the activity in the main field, Phil, because what he will hope is that everybody will be starting to take on board drinks and starting to eat a little bit before the final crucial stage of this race, and he can get himself a good 1 or 2 minutes advantage.
Well, he's got the gap, and that's for sure. We might get his number very shortly and see just who it is at the moment. It is Arno Coyo who's gone clear. There we are, confirmed.
Long section of cobblestones. He's got himself about a 15-second advantage over the front end of the main field. Shadows is now at coming up to 2:30 in the afternoon local time, Phil, starting to look very long in the sky. It's a beautiful day here in the Flanders as we rejoin the leading group now, and this is the leading group of 7 riders, still holding on to around about the 4-minute mark. And this is the climb of the Tyenberg.
It is amazing, but you can't fool the Belgian public. They know where to go in the thousands to watch this race, and the Tyenberg is one of the monuments of the Tour of Flanders as well. And you might see this little breakaway split up on this climb as it bites at those legs. 64 kilometers to go. Coyo, he's going to get to this turn next, I think, and the gap. We haven't been inside 4 minutes yet, but we're heading that way now at 4:07. But that isn't to the peloton. I would suspect that is now to the rider chasing.
You can see now that Team Quick-Step are starting to take this just a little bit more seriously. They know how difficult the Tyenberg is. That's Tom Boonen up into 2nd place, and he's asked one of his teammates to come forward and whip up the pacemaking, because now they're starting to get a little bit more serious, Phil, about the Tour of Flanders. We're getting into around about the last hour and a half of racing. And it's now in this last hour and a half that we're going to face up to another 10 climbs. We've only done 8. There's 10 to go.
And Quick-Step have both of their men here. They've got the white jersey of world champion Bettini, and they've got Bonen. And I'm pretty sure, too, they've got Van Petegem. And so they're going to be feeling very content at the 64 kilometre to go point. their tactics are working out. Back with the leaders just for the moment, the head of the race, as they now begin the little way over the top of the Teinberg, and still the cobbles persist. And it looks like they have all stayed together here, with surprising performance here by Garcia Acosta, but he's such a strong bike rider. He's not a man we would think would be suited at all to the Tour of Flanders, yet here he is in the leading group and looking good.
Well, he'll have a couple of stories to take back to Spain there. Somebody's missed the corner there going over the cobblestone. In fact, somebody's gone down there over the railway crossing over to the right-hand side, and that was halfway down the main field. This, Phil, has got to be the Tour of Flanders of the crash this year. It's a T-Mobile rider who's gone down there, and I think it's Lorenzo Bernucci, a former world champion, if I'm not correct.
It is.
At the under-23 level of the sport.
And he's hit those railway tracks rather heavily.
No, they've got it wrong. They're saying it's Burkhardt, but it's not. It's Bernucci, 134. And he's gone down very hard indeed, I tell you.
He's hit the railroad crossing there, and he looks as though he's landed very, very badly on his hip. So I hope he hasn't fractured his pelvis there, but that's a nasty fall. And you've heard all the shouts. Well, no, it's not a good place to stop for anybody by the sound of the shouts and the screams from the riders. Here's the crash again. Oh, it was a very nasty fall, Paul. He went down on the railroad and skidded straight across it.
Yeah, that would have really rattled him quite a bit there. And you see everybody else, all the other riders are just managing to get around him there. But somebody all of a sudden notices the accident and has to straighten up.
Now, this could be a very interesting climb, because Quick-Step are coming to the foot of this climb with all three of their big men right at the front.
Well, they know what this is about, and this
the biggest man's right there. Well, he's a little man, really.
He's the little big man, I suppose we better call him.
It.
Paolo Bettini, champion of the world, has got his teammate Tom Bonen right on his wheel. And Bettini, I think today, has said, you know, Tom, I think you are in good form. I know you want to win this 3 times in a row. There's absolutely no love lost. There's no hard feelings between them. And Coyot is very quickly back in the fold, and he's almost stopped.
They're on him straight away here now, as Il Grillo, the cricket, comes jumping up the climb here, towing with him his team captain for the day, Tom Bonen. But he looks so good, the world champion. He's recovering from a broken rib, remember. Doesn't seem to affect his breathing today. But look at Oscar Freire, Paul. He's locked in on third wheel. He's following Bonen.
He's keeping himself very much at the front end of this group, is Oscar Freire. Now, if they want to win Tour of Flanders here this afternoon, Phil, they're going to have to get rid of him, because you know what? If they take him to the finish line, he's a very difficult man to beat in the sprint.
He certainly is, and he spoke very good English this morning at the start too. And when he was asked, could he win the Tour of Flanders, his answer was, why not? So we're watching now Peter van Petegem slipping slightly off the back here. Cofidis again launching an attack off the front, riding pretty well at the moment. The new colours for Cofidis this year. Nick Noyens is their leader here, and could well be in at the kill today. I haven't seen him yet.
Well, this is the week, I should say, of the Northern Classics. The 2 races. Tour of Flanders is the one that we're watching right now, and of course Paris-Roubaix is the one next weekend. But these 2 races, Phil, they really are, to me, the monuments of the first part of the season. They are incredible races, and it's a surprise to see number 4 at the back there, Peter van Petegem.
Yes.
But, you know, age is creeping up on him.
Yes, and so is the cobblestones. I think he's been pushed right to the back of this group now. Things are not going good. He shouldn't be there. He's such a great tactical rider, but maybe the legs won't get him where he wants to be just at the moment. There's Peter van Petegem, a 2-time winner of the Tour of Flanders, the Ronde van Vlaanderen. 3:22 the gap, and here's Peter's here as we look back at this picture. He came off the back very, very quickly here. It's almost as if he knew that he didn't have it for the Tyenberg, because he really gave up the minute the climb started.
Well, that's a big surprise, because that's a man in the past we've always seen riding at the front of the climbs of the Ronde van Vlaanderen. That time gap has come down pretty dramatically, but you can see the damage now that climb has done, Phil, because it's projected around about 30 riders to the front of this race. And again, it's the big scramble behind, just trying to stay in contact, trying to pull yourself back to the main field. Psychologically, though, if this happens to you once and then twice and then a third time, you really start to feel very much like a broken man.
Well, the tree's just beginning to break out in leaf. That's the taller trees. The bushes are all well into leaf now as spring is on the way. Summer's just around the corner. The Tour of Flanders for a 91st time is coursing through this beautiful countryside. And as always, it's a classic battle. It's a battle against the bicycle, against the roads, and you hardly have time to think of the riders you're trying to control. But Quick Step are doing everything right just now. 60 kilometres or 38 miles still to go to the finish. 3:16 is the gap. And here we have a move here by Quick Step. Well, I'm not sure who it is. It could be Kevin Hulsmans again, who's made a move off the front.
Well, they're trying to make it very difficult for everybody, I think, here this afternoon, but he's joined very quickly there by Van Sommeren of Predictor Lotto. Look at the long line of riders there, though, Phil. They're not letting anybody get too far off the front end of the main field. The riders now are going to go through the small towns of Etikhoven and then Markerkerken before they then get to the Eikenberg, which in itself is also a very difficult climb. The gap on the 7 leaders is basically just being wiped away slowly but surely as we head down towards the last hour and a bit of racing.
Well, I reckon they'd have been caught at 50 kilometres. They might survive. It's only 9 kilometres from that point now, and the gap is still 3 minutes and 15 seconds. As Johan van Sommeren tries to get this race reshaped here. He's ridden well in this race before, as he now tries to get clear yet again.
He's that rider that, if you ever watch the Tour de France, is always called upon to ride for kilometre after kilometre on the front end of the peloton when there is a breakaway and they want to pull it back for their sprinter in the month of July. Robbie McEwen here, he's riding for himself. He's riding in what he regards as the World Championships of Belgium here this afternoon. De Ronde, the race that they all love, the race that makes the crowds turn out. And today, on a perfect Easter Sunday, the weather has been absolutely ideal for what is going to be a very dramatic finish. Still about 59 kilometres to go for the leaders, who are 3 minutes in front of these riders as they go now through the small town of Etikhoven, and that to me puts them around about 3 kilometres away from the next climb, hill number 10, the Eikenberg.
Van Sommeren, Hulsmans then try to cause a reaction, or are they just deflecting the pressure off certainly the Quick-Step teammates? I'm not sure who that rider was, Park. There was it a club cyclist?
It was a club cyclist
so
who should not have been there at all. I think he got caught out by the speed which with those riders arrived, and he very quickly got himself out of the way.
Well, he almost got caught out there because these boys...
Oh, someone's gone down again. This is unbelievable. There's somebody just dropped it in the corner there, and that looks to me as if it's one of the riders from Liquigas. Phil, there have been so many riders crashing today. I've never seen so many crashes in a bike race like this, and he's taking a lot of risks there, and he's putting a lot of other riders there into a little bit of danger.
Save one and take out 2 others seems to be the motto of the spectator there, and the leaky gas rider here also has a problem now, and this is a flat tyre. I think this is Paolini. That's Luca Paolini. Well, he is a rider who would have a real candidature to win this race, and now he's looking at a flat back tyre and he's far from amused.
Well, that's probably what the problem was when he went down there. Let's just have a look at this again and see how it happened.
Wow, that was a heavy fall as well for no reason, Paul.
Very heavily indeed.
Tyres might be very hard. There's a lot of dirt and dust on these roads. Maybe they're just sliding out, but there's Petito on the left now. He's come up alongside Paolini, and they're spending an awful lot of time by the roadside. That is not a good sign. That could be the end of Paolini's hopes. This race today is one crash after another, and every corner presents us with a new problem as we see the gold flags now of the line of Flanders being waved. This is the breakaway. They are just inside 3 minutes the gap now, and only 58 kilometres left to run.
Well, there's been a lot of chaos in this Tour of Flanders. I hate to put a figure, Phil, on the number of riders who've actually gone down in crashes. It seems like every 5 or 10 minutes there's a crash as the riders who are riding across the gap now are facing up to the Eikenberg. The main field is still around about 3.5 minutes behind. There it is, 3:23 to be precise. And this second group on the road is at 2 minutes and 50 seconds.
Yes, Kevin Hulsmans and Johan van Sommeren. Van Sommeren's been really strong. He's marshaled the front of the race all of the time. Looks like he's ready to do it again as well, as he races towards the crowd and spreads them back onto the grass.
What he's doing there is, in fact, if you've ever ridden in this part of the world, he was racing across to get on a little piece of tarmac just over to the right-hand side of the road there. Gives you a fraction of respite from the hammering of the cobblestones, but sadly the race organisers there, Phil, they put the barriers up, so you have to ride on the cobblestones. That's quite mean.
Not fair. Here come the rest of the peloton. They're not really getting away, that duo, Hulsmans and Summeren, yet from the peloton. Here comes the peloton. It's regrouped again. Still a big group of riders here. And Jiminy Cricket's riding in the centre of the road in the white jersey, the world champion. Just keeping his own pace, always makes his space. And look at him on the left of the road as we look at the picture. Here's the leaders, Garcia da Costa, the next man around. Jose Vincenti, Garcia Acosta, to give him his full name. Having a great ride today. These are all the boys in the breakaway. Still 7 riders. Still really no sign of a weak link. Steven Kathoven, the rider at the back here in Chocolat Jacques colours, doesn't like the climbs. He's always at the back on them at least. But even so, he doesn't seem to be in any trouble. He doesn't lose contact with this breakaway. Well, 3:20.
All of these riders, as you say, Phil, I think are probably all pretty much in the same physical state right now. All they're thinking about is survival. I think they now know that they will get caught before the end. It's just a question of when will that happen. So they'll keep riding together, keep surviving and trying to conserve as much of their advantage as possible, because even if they do get caught, they're always getting a fair amount of publicity for their team sponsors.
Well, we're getting to the famous names of the cycling is still to come here. The Eichenberg is where they're headed to now. This is the hairpin bend for them. And just look at the crowd down there. Terrific crowd. A marvellous crowd, in fact. And they'll be off as soon as the riders are through here to try and get to the final vantage point, perhaps at the Gredordsberger, which is the Muur de Grammont, where no following cars are allowed because the road is so steep and narrow. They have to take a different route.
Well, that corner you can see there is the top of the Eichenberg. The riders swinging away. And sadly enough, they'll drop back down into exactly the same valley where they were a few moments ago. And in 4 kilometers time, they'll line up for the Boineberge. And that's a climb of 1 kilometer with, again, a maximum gradient of 12%.
2:41. And that's to those 2 riders, and 3:19 to the big pack, the peloton. We're looking at those at the moment. And terrific speed here. We're still well up on the schedules as the riders now drive at the front. No idea of the carnage at the back as riders scramble. And of course now they're getting tired as well. They're making mistakes. And we've seen all of these falls, just 1 or 2 riders. It says a lot about the skill of the professional bike rider, who they don't fall. 1 or 2 pop out of the peloton. The rest get round the problem. Here they are, regrouping steadily at the front. I was just trying to see if that was Van Summeren who's being put back in his place, but I don't think it is. No, it isn't.
Not yet. This looks like Stein de Volder at the front end of the group, looking over his shoulder. It's a fairly large group too. There's a lot of riders who have managed to recover and get themselves back up to this main field. And every time it slows down like this, the scramble at the rear, Phil, will be to try and make contact. As we look again at this leading group, they're now just getting themselves almost to the summit of the Boineberg.
Yes, and again, no weak men. Mangel at the back this time, is at the front on the previous climb. This is a smooth road climb, this one, so it's not quite so bad as the others, but the legs are getting tired now. This breakaway has been in the lead now for not far off 150 kilometres.
AG2R rider just sitting at the back there now is really starting to pay for all the effort that he's put in during the course of this afternoon. And that is Laurent Mangel. Good to see Garcia Acosta, because we commentated on him a lot over the years, Phil, normally in the big grand tours. But for him, I would say here, representing Case d'Epargne, he'll have a good story to tell when he goes home to Spain this afternoon.
Yes, and he's on the same team as the more famous Alejandro Valverde, but he's not here. He'll be around shortly, though. Expect to see him when the Spring Classics get underway and move further south down into the